would stop.
It might be a mass grave, Mary.
No, it's not a mass grave.
Beside the car.
Okay, let's do. Car.
Oh, and you got bugs in your hair, beetles there.
Look at that. She's picking on me. She's picking on me, everyone.
She had little orange beetles in her hair.
Likely story.
Yeah.
They are coming to my orange sweatshirt.
Anyway, what month is it?
It is October.
And you got beetles.
Yes, they love me.
Oh, God.
I'm just so sugary sweet that they just flock to me.
Apparently.
They flock to me.
But today we're here because, first of all, we're going to do a little rewind, because for the past 5 years, who have we been looking for?
We have been searching for lavender lily.
And have we tracked her down?
We have come up with a big goose egg in terms of really digging in and finding a viable trail in which to follow.
Notice she used that word digging.
Digging.
No, we have not been digging, I promise you. But today we're going to have kind of a discussion, and it's going to end with another possible ghost story. But I want to talk about, how these stories get started. Because I don't know about you, but I have heard from so many people stories about, oh, you should have talked to my grandma.
Yes.
Or my great aunt. They knew all about it.
Or you need to go in this direction to this cemetery, or there's this other kind of abandoned cemetery over there. Or, we've been up and down, round and round. I think we've done due diligence to Miss Lily, but Nancy's going to fill you in on the backstory. And so let's take a little walk, Nancy. What do you think?
We are up here on top of Montana Ridge, and this is supposed to be the haunted ridge where Lavender Lily walks around. Here, I got bugs in my hair.
Yeah, I'm getting bit on the leg right now.
Well, like I say, we are up here on Montana Ridge, that haunted ridge, and we are at the Catholic cemetery. There used to be a church here, a small church, and across the road there was a store and a school. A little community up here. And I think it was in the 1950s that the church, the amount of members they had gotten pretty low. And by then people could get around better. They had cars and were willing to drive farther to church. So this church was closed and it was taken down. But this is called the St. Peter and Paul's Catholic Church Cemetery. As you can see, it is well taken care of, and there have not been any recent burials here. And if you go on YouTube or just Google, lavender lily, lots of times what pops up is a particular tombstone, and I'm not sure why that one, it looks really different than everything else out here. Maybe that's why that picture just kind of shows up. And the story of Lavender Lily, if you don't know it, if there's anyone that hasn't heard the story, is that two boys were up here on Montana Ridge and they were driving, and it was Halloween night, and they saw this young pretty girl walking down the road, and it was a cold night, and so they gave her a ride, and the one boy loaned the young girl his jacket, and they took her to where she lived and let her out, and she went into the house, and they drove off. Well, they just got down the road a little ways when they realized that the young lady still had their jacket. So they turned around and went back and went up to the door and rapped on the door, and an elderly couple came out, and they said, the boys said, could we get the jacket back? We're the ones that brought your daughter home. And at that point, the story says that either the couple was really angry or they were, broke down in tears. Anyway, they said it was a year ago that night that their daughter had been killed in a car accident up there. And then somehow, the boys drove away, and when they went by this cemetery, they saw their jacket, and it was hanging on a tombstone in this particular cemetery. That's the basic story, which had no timeline, no names other than up on Montana Ridge. And the interesting thing is that this story of Lavender Lily has got legs. It's also been down in Chicago. I can't find that it's ever been out on the East Coast, but it's definitely kind of a Midwestern ghost story, and I can find no basis for it. I have spent a lot of time just looking on the old census figures and names, old plat maps for people that lived in this area, and I cannot find a Lily that fit the description of this young girl. I can't find anything about a girl being killed in an accident up here. I can find no basis for it. But there is one thing, in that there have been several bad accidents up here on Montana Ridge. And also, if you keep on going down into Bolin Valley. So there have been some bad accidents, and maybe that's part of it. But let's just walk over here and look at this tombstone that where for some reason it seems to be the one that everybody thinks the jacket was hung on. It's actually made of some kind of a metal, and it is unique. You can see there is not another stone in the cemetery that looks like it. And this was the tombstone, the plot for a young lady by the name of Apollonia Fagan. And she was born in 1856, and she died in 1883. And what I could find out on the old censuses and forms was that she died in childbirth. She already had a couple of kids. And that's where they buried her, right here. So I can't see that that has anything to do with the legend of Lavender Lily. But this is where we often see a coat hanging on it. So maybe it's just convenient because it's a nice shape to hang a coat. But stories usually have a basis. They usually have like a kernel of truth or something that it started from. But I have to say that with this Lavender Lily, just can't find anything. I cannot find any basis for it. Nothing that seems to fit. And there's so many stories going on up here. There was a farm around the side of the hill here, and supposedly that farm was abandoned, and it had some kind of connection to Lily. Kids had parties there. The house started on fire, and the fire department from Independence came out and put it out. But then a couple weeks later, it just kind of spontaneously combusted again. And this time the owner, Mr. Shishak, said, just let it burn. So it's not there anymore. But I've had people tell me, oh yeah, my mother went by there, and as she went by there, the house burst into flames. And I've heard so many stories. Even today I heard one about teenager boys from Independence and Gilmington coming up to this cemetery, and they were looking for Lavender Lily. Well, the girls in their classes heard about this, and they got here before the boys, and they hid, and they were making noises, to creep out the boys. And I guess the boys left in a big hurry. There's all kinds of stories, but there just isn't any, I can't find any proof about it. Well, then I thought, well, maybe we're not getting anywhere with Lily. Are there any other ghosts around here? We're a pretty ghost-free area, actually, but I did find somebody said that they had heard of a story of a haunted field up by Osseo, where some young girl had been murdered and, viciously cut up or hurt or maimed. So I kind of did some looking for that. And so now we're going to talk about what I found, and we'll probably leave here, Montana Ridge. This again is the St. Peter and Paul Catholic Church, old Catholic cemetery. A very nice, very peaceful place, but for some reason this is just associated with Lavender Lily. Now here's something interesting here. There is definitely, it's either the base for somebody's tombstone or maybe one that fell over. It's down in the grass and you can't really see what it says anything on it. But definitely a stone. And then right next to it is this big depression where you have to figure somebody was probably buried. So we don't know the names apparently of everybody that's in this cemetery. So it's just, we don't know. But that's part of the story of Lavender Lily. And she's called Lavender because supposedly she was wearing a lavender dress, or some people say a lavender prom dress. We don't know. And when Mary and I drove in here today, there was something new. There was this big slab, and Mary thinks maybe there's going to be some signage. I said, well, maybe it's a mass grave. We just don't know. Okay, Mary and I are proceeding down the Haunted Ridge, Montana, Haunted Ridge. And there is one other cemetery up here that's also associated with Lavender Lily. And that is a point of contention because some people say that no, the Catholic cemetery is the one where Lily hangs out. And other people insist no, it's the one that's farther down Montana Ridge. So we'll just run by that one anyway, quickly.
Just in case?
Just in case.
Just in case. Now, in the process of figuring all this stuff out, Nancy, I mean, how do you check these archives? Where do you go to look for all these records?
Well, I just go online. I have Ancestry.com membership, and that gives you a lot of resources. And mainly up here, you look on the old census figures. Every 10 years there was a census where they had to write down everybody on a farm, or everybody in the house, their names, their ages, the occupations. That's a really good place to start. Other than that, you can look in old plat books. Sometimes they'll tell you quite a bit.
In looking in old plat books, were you ever able to find the Lily name?
No, it wasn't. I mean, right now, Lily is kind of a popular name for girls. It's a pretty name, but back in, around the turn of the century, 1900, a little bit before and a little bit past, it really was not a trendy name, and I couldn't find too many people that even had Lily as a name, or Lillian. It just was not a real popular name, apparently. But there are some pretty straight stretches of road up here, and you know what happens when there are straight stretches of road around here. People tend to get going pretty fast. And so there have been some bad accidents, and sometimes I think, well, maybe that kind of got rolled into the legend too. It's like a snowball. It's a small little piece of snow, and then you pack it together and you start rolling, and it starts picking up more snow and sticks and stones and mud until you got this great big, piece of snowball. What do you do with it anyway? That's kind of the way some of these stories are too. You get stuff added on to them, and where is the kernel of truth? It's like somebody said, it's like a piece of popcorn, and it pops, but there's a kernel in there that is, the seed for the
tidbit of truth.
Right. Somebody hears a story and maybe they didn't get it totally right, but they tell somebody else and they tack something onto it, and then we get all these people that come and tell us, oh, you're either looking in the wrong place, or you should have talked to so-and-so, my great aunt's cousin or whatever. They knew all about it. Well, lots of times those people aren't around anymore. So yeah, it just becomes hearsay. That's all it is. But this is supposedly the road that Lily was wandering on, walking up and down. Now, right now, we're coming up to this other cemetery. And this is a cemetery that right now, there is a nice sign up there, and it says that it's being taken care of by the Lutheran Church in Arcadia. But I did some research and I found out that there was a church up here, and it was a German Methodist church originally. Now, I have had people, Mary, tell me that this cemetery just scares them to death, that they think this is really frightening. And I just think it's kind of a quiet, pretty little cemetery up here on top of the ridge. But you can see this is another very peaceful, well cared for cemetery. But this is where they buried the Protestants. I've had people tell me, oh, that is so frightening. They just scared me to death looking at that cemetery. So. One lady said that the back of this cemetery just scared her so much. And I don't know, I don't see anything scary about the back of the cemetery, but.
Have you found anything? Here we are, right here. Oh boy.
Where are we, Mary?
We are wandering. We are trying to find some lost souls.
Well, we just found her, actually.
Yes.
And today, I said we're going to talk about, there aren't too many ghost stories in this county, in this area. It was mainly Lavender Lily, but then there was supposedly a haunted field up by Osseo where a girl had been murdered. A young girl had been murdered. She'd been hideously murdered, you know. And so I was trying to track that legend down, because like I say, there's usually a grain of truth that starts these things going. And so I was doing a lot of Googling. I have an app on my computer that goes through old newspapers. So what you learn to do is, what do you type in, you know, to get your information? What kind of a thing do you search for? Well, I was looking for murders around Osseo, Eliva area, and there were 3 of them, and none of them were pleasant. One was this poor farmer by Strum. He had something like 5 or 6 kids, a new baby, his wife had died, and he just flipped out, and he murdered almost all of his children. He went out and killed all of his farm animals, and then he killed himself. You know, it was just horrific, but that wasn't close to a haunted field. Well, then there was a case over by Eliva of 2 bachelor brothers that got in a tiff, and one was found in a ditch with his feet sticking out, and it was one brother had killed another. But again, that didn't seem to match this ghost story. But then I found this story, and it truly is horrific. And right now, if Mary will turn the camera, we are standing at the grave here at the Osseo Public Cemetery. This is Dorothy Leona Metcalf. She died in 1938. She was 17 years old. And this is the story. And I don't have a lot of filler. I can't give you a lot of details. All we know is that in January 19th, 1938, someone driving home, and they were up in section 6, saw a car burning out in a field. I mean, it was burning violently. And they called the sheriff. They got people there because it was so hot they couldn't get near it. And it was, at that time, it was Sheriff Brom that came up. Sheriff Brom, I'm sure he had never had to deal with anything like this. It looked like that there were people in this car that were burning. And it wasn't that far off the road. They said it just kind of got off the road, and it was snowy, and it had gone a ways into the brush, and it hadn't turned over or done anything like that. So when it finally burned down, they found there were 2 people in this car. And as more information came out, the passenger in the car was this young Dorothy Metcalf, 17 years old. She'd been shot twice, and the fella driving it was a man by the name of Benny Christensen. He was 35 years old, and now, according to the papers, he and Miss Metcalf had been keeping company for over a year. And the story gets murkier because he was married. He had a wife by the name of Emma. And the Christensens lived down off of Holman Road there in the northern part of Hale Township. This Benny, they said he was a farmer, but basically he was a milk hauler. Now the Metcalfs farmed a little farther north. They might have even been over the county line, north of Osseo. But he'd been keeping company here for a year, and I don't have any other details. You know, did everybody know about it? Was a secret romance? Was he and his wife together? It didn't say any of that. And because it was such a terrible, lurid murder, that the big newspapers picked it up. In 1938, newspapers were very competitive. They always wanted to find, you know, a nasty story that everybody would run out and buy that newspaper to find out all about it. And what they did find, because there were 2 bodies in this car and they had been burned beyond recognition, but they were able to ascertain that Dorothy had been shot twice, and that this Benny, apparently, what had happened is he was supposedly taking her home. She was living with her sisters who lived up there. She was married to an Olson and lived up around Section 6. And before he went to get her, he had purchased a big can of gas. And so he was taking her home, and all of a sudden he drove off the field, and apparently he shot her. And then he took the gas and he spilled it all around the car, just drenched the car. And then he drenched the body of Dorothy and then himself, and then he shot himself. So it was a murder-suicide. And at first, people looking at this situation, they thought, was it an accident or what had happened here? But it became apparent. They found a rifle, and it had, you know, was missing 2 or 3 shells. That what had happened, that it had been a murder-suicide. And it was, then some of the newspapers reported that Dorothy had told this Benny Christensen that she didn't want to keep company with him anymore, and she would rather go with somebody her own age, and that apparently is what set him off. But of course, this is all hearsay. You don't really know. But I think that this is the basis of that story about the girl in a haunted field that had been murdered terribly. So this is poor Dorothy, and we don't know much about her. She had 5 or 6 siblings. Her parents were farming, and it sounded like this was, you know, the Depression, 1938, that they had maybe moved to several different farms over there. You know, the situation that the family had, that first they had lived down in the southern part of the county and then Neillsville, and now they were farming north of Osseo. And as for this Benny Christensen, he had this wife, and he was, besides farming, he was hauling cream. And so, you know, your mind starts going, you know, kind of filling in the blanks. You know, had he met her while he was hauling milk, or what had gone on? You know, it's quite an age difference between 35 and 17. And we don't know anything about Dorothy. They said that she had quit high school and was living with her sister, and that's about it. And when I looked at the death certificates, the informant for Benny Christensen was his wife, Emma. So apparently they were at least still together enough that she wanted to be the informant on his death certificate. And I tried to trace her. Apparently she moved over to Black River Falls and kind of lost track of her. But what a terrible thing. And it was just such a lurid thing, you know, this young girl and this older man and this terrible, terrible murder-suicide. So this is poor Dorothy, only 17 years old, and we don't know really anything about her. And we don't know what she looked like. I mean, all you can do is, you know, you get pictures in your mind, you're imagining. But now Mary and I are going to try to drive out there and see if we can figure out where this haunted field supposedly was. Like I say, I think this is the basis of this terrible legend. Let's go. This is a 1932 plat book for Trempealeau County showing the town of Sumner. Now, if this murder-suicide took place in Section 6, which was right up here in the northwest corner, that today is Highway 53 going up to Eau Claire, it said this happened on the John Stillman farm, which is right here. So Mary and I, right now, we're down here over near the cemetery. We're going to drive up there and see if we can figure out. It said there wasn't any deep ditch or anything that this Christensen had to drive through to get into the field. That's why at first they could not figure why this car was out there burning, you know, what had happened, because there wasn't any serious damage or rollovers or anything. There wasn't anything like that. It looked like they had just driven off the road and gone into the field a ways and stopped.
Now, Nancy, are you aware, has Highway 53 changed since 1938?
Oh, I'm sure it has. I'm sure it has somewhere along the way. Let's see, hand me that other plat book. That's a new one. Okay, let's look at what it looks like on the new plat book. So here's a recent plat book. I think it's like 2021. Okay. So here's 53, and up here, which was the John Stillman farm, is now the Congos farm. So it doesn't really look like
no,
the
just
road has changed.
It looks like they just rounded the corner.
Yeah, that's about all. So
comparing the two.
Yeah, we'll drive up there and look. And it was a real tragedy. It was really sad doing the research on this. I did find where Benny Christensen is buried in, on the death certificate, it just said Hale Cemetery. But I was told that Hale Cemetery is at Elk Creek Lutheran Church on top of the hill, that's considered Hale Cemetery, and I did find him buried there. So,
do you think he haunts that cemetery, looking for his long lost love?
I don't know. That's an interesting thought, but they didn't say anything about him haunting anybody. They thought that there was a haunted field, but they didn't. None of the things gave a lot of details, and there just aren't a lot of details. And as I was saying, you know, nowadays they talk about fake news, but back in the 30s, oh my gosh, it was hard to believe hardly anything they had in some of those newspapers, because they were very competitive and they were always trying to, you know, outscoop the other newspaper with some kind of fresh details or some terrible story like this.
Something with a little bit of gore attached to it.
Yeah, something like this. And the local newspapers, you know, the smaller newspapers around the county, they didn't really print much about this whole thing. I think they thought that it was just hardly fit for the public to hear about. It was just too wild, too lurid, and that's the only word I can think of for it. But it was really sad. I mean, this poor Dorothy, she was only 17. And let's face it, you know, lots of times teenagers don't always make super good decisions. So it's hard telling how this whole, you know, romance, if that's what it was, with Mr. Christensen. But we'll go up and see if we can find this field. So right now we are on Highway 53 going north towards Eau Claire, and this was the section, and this was the Stillman farm up here, and supposedly Dorothy's sister was married to a man who was renting this Stillman farm, or part of it. And according to one newspaper, it was this brother-in-law that actually found this burning car. But like I say, those newspaper accounts were just so unreliable. So I'm thinking that it might be something like this field right here. Now you can see there is kind of a slope down into this field, but
or they could have gone straight off.
Yeah. They just followed the tracks. It had gone out in this field, and then it had stopped near some brush, is where this car was burning away. And they didn't know whose car it was. They tracked it down.
It could have been on either side of the road.
Yeah, but it sounded like it was on this side, because that was the Stillman farm.
Okay.
And this Christensen had recently purchased this car. He bought it 2 weeks before, not locally, from somebody else, and that was how they eventually traced it back, because they had no idea who was in the car. It was such a hot fire, they had no idea who was in it. So I'm thinking this haunted field, it might be this one, or it could be this one, because this would have been an easy one to drive into. Yeah, either of these fields would be candidates anyway.
So if you're ever driving up or down Highway 53 north of Highway 10 on a snowy road, you have to watch, because maybe you'll see a girl in the field.
Yeah, that's... Like I said, there aren't many ghosts in Trempealeau County that I've been able to track down. And this is the only story that I could find that would match anything about a girl being murdered in a field. And it could be either of these fields. You know, they're flat. They did not have to go through some big ditch to get to wherever they were.
Well, and we're talking almost 100 years of erosion, Nancy. So the fields are not probably as tall as they were in the 1930s.
And we don't know. It was winter, it was snow. We don't know what was in that field. Was it corn stubble? Was it a pasture? We don't know. We just don't have any details. No matter all these articles, they all seemed to focus on this terrible fire and this girl being shot and the guy killing himself. It was just so terrible. This is not something that, you know, normally happened in Trempealeau County. It just wasn't. So
that's about as spooky as we're going to get for today.
That's it. I don't have any more information about this terrible Christensen Metcalf tragedy. It really was terrible. And like I say, a lot of the newspapers, it was really hard to put a lot of credibility in a lot of these accounts in the newspapers because they were notorious for just making stuff up. One newspaper said that Dorothy had been in a restaurant in Osseo with some school kids, and this Christensen came in, was angry at her, and she was saying that she didn't want to go with them anymore. But there was only one newspaper that came up with that story, and so that might not be real at all. But that's about it, folks, I'm afraid. We're out here, and you know, this time of year, October, Halloween. So if you're going to see any ghostly figures in these fields, this would be the time. Although this whole thing happened in January.
This would be the location.
Yeah.
Or check back in January.
Yeah. Come out this way on January and see what you find.
You just never know.
You just never know.